Have you ever felt exhausted by the sheer pressure of being you? We live in a culture that champions a very specific hero, the self made man, the self made woman, the person who, through sheer will and inner resolve, forges a destiny independent of their circumstances. And we're told that to be free is to be unencumbered or detached from history, detached from tradition, and detached from any obligation that we didn't choose for ourselves. But if this radical autonomy is the peak of freedom, why does it feel so lonely? Today, we're going to look at the pattern of expressive individualism, the philosophical shift that convinced us that we are islands. And then we're going to look at a parable from 1830s America that suggests the exact opposite, that we are not made in isolation, but made in relationship. To understand why we feel this way, we have to look at the architecture of the modern self. Sociologist Robert Bellah calls our current operating system expressive individualism. It started during the Enlightenment with the idea of the sovereign will, that you are the master of your own understanding. But recently, this has intensified. It's no longer just about thinking for yourself, it's about expressing yourself. The core belief today is that each of us has a unique inner core of feeling and intuition. And the supreme moral duty of your life is to look inside and find that core and then express it to the world. In this view, truth isn't something you find outside yourself in religion, tradition, or community. Truth is something you find inside. As a result, any external claim on your life, anything you didn't explicitly choose, is viewed with suspicion, or even as a form of oppression. And this creates what philosopher Michael Sandel calls the unencumbered self. This self is defined not by its relationships, but by its capacity to choose. We see this in the modern evolution of the self-made archetype. Originally, in the days of Benjamin Franklin, being self-made was about cultivating virtues to serve the community, industry, frugality, public service. Today, it's about inventing yourself as a work of art. The goal isn't to be a useful citizen, it's to be an authentic brand. But here is the cost. When you strip away all the unchosen obligations, the messy, difficult ties to family, neighbors, and history, you don't just get freedom, you get effective polarization and fragmentation. You get a society where politics isn't about the common good, but a battleground for validating our private identities. We have traded away connection for autonomy, and the receipt for that trade is loneliness. But there is another way to view the individual. To find it, we have to travel back to 1831, to a young, messy, bustling America observed by a French thinker named Alexis de Tocqueville. Tocqueville saw the danger of democracy. He saw that because everyone was equal, no one was obligated to anyone else. And he warned that this could lead people to be imprisoned in the isolation of their own hearts. But he also saw the antidote. He saw an embedded individualism. Tocqueville called it the science of association. He was amazed that Americans constantly formed groups, not just for politics or business, but to build inns, to raise churches, to distribute books, and more. For Tocqueville, these associations weren't just hobbies, they were schools of liberty. He realized that you cannot learn to be free by sitting alone in your room thinking about your rights. You learn to be free by the reciprocal action of people upon one another. He also identified a pragmatic philosophy that held this together: self-interest rightly understood. This wasn't about noble self-sacrifice. It was the realization that my well-being is tied to yours. In this version of the story, The self isn't a hidden jewel you find deep inside your psychology. The self is a civic character you build in the public square. So, how do we actually recover? If the pattern is withdrawing into a lonely self-made shell, the parable offers us 3 specific tools to break out. Tocqueville didn't just diagnose the disease, he prescribed the cure. So first, we must relearn how to associate with one another again. In a democracy, we are naturally weak and isolated. The only way to regain power is to artificially create that reciprocal action that society no longer provides. This isn't just about joining a club, it's about placing yourself in a situation where you must deal with other people to solve a problem. Whether it's a zoning board, a soup kitchen, or a choir, association forces you to rub off that private selfishness, which is the rust of society. The self-made myth tells you to look inward to find your purpose. The relational reality reveals that purpose is found when you are forced to consider the needs of someone else. Second, we need to adopt the doctrine of self-interest rightly understood. This is the most practical tool in the box. It doesn't ask you to be a saint, it asks you to be smart. Tocqueville saw that Americans made daily small acts of self-denial, not because they were noble, but because they realized their own happiness was tied to the public good. The modern myth says, maximize your autonomy. The ancient wisdom says, enlighten your selfishness. Realize that the sacrifice you make for your neighbor is actually an investment in your own freedom. Finally, we must recover our second languages, the languages of tradition, faith, and civic virtue. Expressive individualism tells us that unchosen obligations are oppression, but the relational self knows that these obligations to family, to God, to place, are actually the surest signs of our freedom. They are the anchors that keep us from drifting away. And we're left with a choice between 2 liberties. There's the liberty of the unencumbered self, where you're free to invent yourself, but condemned to be alone. And then there's the liberty of the embedded self, bound by duties it didn't choose, but sustained by a community it helps create. The self-made person is a myth that has left us exhausted. Maybe it's time to stop trying to make ourselves and start letting ourselves be made by others. If you want to start mapping these patterns and recovering this kind of wisdom, please like and subscribe to join this community. And I have a specific challenge for you in the comments today. What is one small, unglamorous thing you do for your community that connects you to others? Let's build a list of these habits of the heart down below. Thank you for joining me today and giving me your time and attention. Grace and peace.